Welcome back, everybody, for another depth dive. This time we're looking at something pretty interesting, allergies. And, most people have allergies or know someone who does. And this video we're looking at today has this really kind of crazy angle on it. It's looking at allergies like through an evolutionary lens and suggesting that maybe they're connected to parasitic worms, like the worms that our ancestors used to have to deal with all the time.
Yeah, it's funny when you think about it. We think of hygiene as like a good thing, right? Like washing our hands and keeping things clean. But what if that's actually had some kind of like unintended consequence for our immune system?
Yeah, that's kind of what this video is getting at, that maybe our immune systems are kind of like overreacting now because they don't have those worms to fight anymore. So I'm really curious about this whole thing. Like, how did those worms actually affect our bodies back in the day, especially our immune systems?
Well, those worms weren't just like passive passengers. They were actively trying to, survive inside us. And part of their strategy involves suppressing our immune systems so they could, stay under the radar.
Wow, so they were like these little ninjas sneaking around inside us. But our bodies weren't just going to like give up and let them take over, right?
Right, yes, of course not. Our immune systems are pretty amazing. They evolved all these incredible defenses to fight back. Like it was this constant arms race between our bodies and those worms.
What kind of weapons are we talking about here? Like, what did our immune systems develop?
Well, one thing is these specialized antibodies called IgE, which are kind of like guided missiles that lock onto the worms. And then there are these cells called mast cells. They're like tiny grenades filled with histamine. Histamine is what causes inflammation. And then we have the eosinophils, too, which are like these aggressive attack cells ready to take down the enemy.
Wow, so our bodies were like a whole military operation, geared up to fight these worms. But then we enter the modern era with better sanitation and medicine, and those worms start to disappear. Right. So what happens to all those highly trained troops when their enemy is gone?
Right. That's the big question. The worm hypothesis basically says that our immune systems are still primed for this battle, but now they don't have that enemy to fight. So they might start misfiring and reacting to things that are actually harmless, like pollen or certain foods, mistaking them for those worms.
So it's like our immune systems are overreacting out of boredom, and that overreaction is what we experience as allergies.
Exactly. This video does a really good job of showing how this works. So imagine you're exposed to pollen for the first time. Your immune system, still on high alert, sees it as a threat and produces those IgE antibodies. It's like sending out a search party. And those antibodies attach to those mast cells, the histamine grenades. So now they're armed and ready.
Okay, so now we've got a bunch of armed grenades just waiting around. What happens the next time you encounter pollen?
So you breathe in that pollen again, and those IgE antibodies on the mast cells, they recognize it immediately, and boom, those mast cells release a flood of histamine, like setting off all those grenades.
Oh.
And that's what causes all the allergy symptoms, the sneezing, runny nose, itchy eyes, all that fun stuff. Your body is basically waging war on harmless pollen.
Wow. That's amazing. And sometimes kind of scary, too, because that reaction, it can be pretty severe sometimes, right? Like with anaphylactic shock.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anaphylaxis is when that allergic reaction goes into overdrive, becomes like a system-wide emergency. All that histamine, it causes your blood vessels to widen and leak, which leads to a dangerous drop in blood pressure.
So your body's basically losing fluid really fast.
Right, and that can lead to shock. And to make matters worse, your airways can constrict, making it hard to breathe. It's a really serious situation. Needs immediate medical attention.
Wow. It makes you realize how finely tuned our bodies are, and how even these small changes can have these huge ripple effects.
Exactly. And it really makes you think about how our modern lifestyles might be impacting our health in ways we're only beginning to understand.
I know. I'm thinking about all the people dealing with allergies, myself included. And knowing this backstory, it really makes you look at it in a whole new light. It's not just a random sensitivity. It's like this connection to this ancient battle that's still going on inside our bodies.
It is. And that understanding, it opens up some really interesting possibilities, especially when we start thinking about potential treatments or even ways to retrain our immune systems to be more tolerant.
Retraining our immune systems. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. Is that something scientists are actually working on?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. There's actually a lot of research going on in this area. For example, some scientists are looking into the idea of controlled worm exposure as a potential therapy.
Wait, so are you saying that we might actually give people worms on purpose?
Well, it's not quite that simple. But the idea is to introduce very carefully controlled doses of like worm-like substances or even specific types of worms that have been shown to have beneficial effects. The goal is to kind of modulate the immune response.
Oh, okay, so it's like giving the immune system something to practice on so it doesn't attack those harmless targets.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. The hope is that by exposing the immune system to something that resembles the old enemy, but without actually causing any harm, it might help to rebalance things and reduce those allergic reactions.
Wow, that is incredible. It makes you wonder what other crazy things we might find out as we learn more about the relationship between our bodies and the microscopic world.
It really does show you how complex our biology is and how much we still don't know. And it's not just about allergies either. The absence of worms might also be linked to other conditions, like autoimmune diseases, where the immune system attacks the body's own tissues.
So are you saying that by trying to eliminate one problem, we might have accidentally created another?
It's definitely a possibility that researchers are investigating, it seems like. Our bodies evolved to exist in a certain balance with these parasites. And disrupting that balance can have these unexpected consequences.
It's like a delicate ecosystem, and if you remove one element, it can throw the whole system off.
Exactly. And it just shows you how important it is to have a holistic view of health. We can't just focus on eliminating threats. We need to understand the whole system and strive for balance.
I like that, strive for balance. So, speaking of balance, this video we're looking at, it also mentioned this nonprofit organization called GiveWell, which focuses on global health.
Oh yeah, GiveWell. They're a really interesting organization. They do all this research to identify the most impactful charities around the world, including ones that are fighting neglected tropical diseases, like parasitic worm infections.
Oh, that's cool. So if someone's watching this and they're thinking, okay, maybe getting rid of all the worms wasn't such a good idea, could they support an organization like GiveWell?
Absolutely. GiveWell's whole approach is about making sure that our efforts to improve global health are both effective and ethical. They recognize that it's a really complex issue.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that even though we might have made progress against these diseases in some parts of the world, there are still a lot of people who are affected by them. And we need to find ways to address those challenges without causing more problems.
Exactly. It's about finding sustainable solutions that benefit everyone in the long run.
Right. So bringing it back to us, the allergy sufferers in the developed world, what can we take away from all of this?
I think the biggest thing is a shift in perspective. We tend to think of allergies as like a personal sensitivity or weakness. But this new understanding shows us that it's really this complex interplay between our evolutionary history, our immune systems, and our environment.
Yeah, it really does. It makes you realize that allergies aren't just some random thing. They're like this window into our evolutionary past.
Right. It is fascinating. And it shows how connected everything is, like our bodies and our environment, and even the tiny organisms we live with.
It's a lot to think about. So where do we go from here? What can people do with all this information?
Well, I think the most important thing is, if you have allergies, don't just ignore them. Talk to your doctor. There are treatments that can really help manage your symptoms and improve your quality of life.
That's good advice. Don't suffer in silence. And in the meantime, maybe we can all try to be a little more understanding of our immune systems. I mean, they're not trying to make us miserable. They're just doing their best to protect us, even if they overreact sometimes.
Exactly. And the more we learn about how they work, the better we'll be able to manage those overreactions.
It seems like there's still so much to learn about this whole connection between allergies and worms. Who knows what other discoveries are out there?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for immunology. And it just shows you that even something as common as allergies can teach us so much about our evolutionary history and the balance of nature.
It is a good reminder that there's always more to learn. Well, if anyone wants to learn more about this, I definitely recommend checking out that animated video we mentioned. It really helps you visualize all these complex processes.
And if you're interested in learning more about the global effort to fight neglected tropical diseases, you can check out GiveWell's website. They're doing some amazing work.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive for today. We covered a lot of ground, but the main takeaway for me is our bodies are incredible and complex, and understanding our past can help us find solutions for the present.
I agree. And as we keep learning and adapting, it's important to approach these challenges with curiosity and humility, because there's always more to discover.
Well said. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.